Never has this country in recent times ever witnessed an event to that occurred in the beginning of 2021 in this country. The general population of the United States expected the year of 2021 as the year that everything returns to normalcy after a long and boring year of 2020, a year that was plagued by a worldwide pandemic of the coronavirus. The Capitol building in Washington, D.C. was overtaken by a group of followers of the Republican Party in January 6, 2021. I will inform you about all the events that occurred that day in the capital of the United States of America. I will also talk about how the riots were riled up by political events, lack of law enforcement, and the result of the riot, which happened after. The first time the Capitol was breached in U.S. history was when British soldiers entered the Capitol in 1814, 200 years ago. And for this to happen again 200 years later with no serious events that occurred in between, it's pretty serious, pretty important. But there are some notable events, such as in 1954 when 4 people armed with handguns from Puerto Rican nationalists entered the Capitol building, opened fire on 5 members of Congress, but luckily no one was killed. But that cannot be said the same for the next event that occurred in 1998 when an armed assailant entered the Capitol building, killing 1 officer sadly. One of the reasons the protest occurred was caused by political events, and you would think that a protest in a political building will be caused by political events. That happened months prior. There were protests and riots. The main reason being Donald Trump. Then President Trump, was accused of inciting the events that occurred in Washington, D.C., claiming illegitimate ballots, often pressuring some states to do a recount. And some of the aftermath of that recount often led to more Biden votes than Trump votes, which is kind of ironic. The other political event that sparked the protest was the Democratic Party winning the 2020 presidential election. In November 7, Biden was hailed the winner of the election after multiple state recounts of the ballots. You would think that one of the most important buildings in this country would be heavily protected, but this wasn't the case during this protest. The government knew that there would be a protest, but they did not expect such a huge amount of people to arrive, and the protesters knew this, and they turned the peaceful protest into a full-blown riot that led to some unfortunate events. Since there was a lack of law enforcement, the protest turned into a riot, and what happened after the riot it's pretty sad what occurred after. The results of the riots resulted in 5 people dead and 140 people being injured, sadly, but luckily not as 140 people has died from what I read. The congressmen and women were evacuated hours prior the protest turning into a riot, which is good to hear. You don't want to see people in power be injured by silly reasons. And the Capitol building was vandalized. Even though the Capitol building was, protected, it was difficult for the protesters to enter, and so they took measures to get in the Capitol building, often breaking windows to get inside the buildings, and they often vandalized the internal structures of the building as well. So I will tell you about all the events that led the protest into a riot. What started the protest and after the riot? Political events: Donald Trump, Joe Biden, the lack of law enforcement turning the peaceful protest into a riot, or the protesters turning the peaceful riot protest into a riot, and the results of the riot in 5 people being dead, 140 people being injured, congressmen and women being evacuated, the Capitol building being vandalized. Sorry. The United States did not expect such an event to occur during this year of return of normalcy, but it happened in the most important building in this country. We saw the president incited the events, how the lack of law enforcement caused the protest to turn into a riot, and what resulted after the riot will now be in future history books for children to read. It's pretty weird, to be honest. The whole event may have shocked the whole country, but knowing that we can overcome such an event may give us peace and knowledge that we can overcome anything that comes our way. We must be better prepared next time, but hopefully no event such as this happens again, only if it's for the right reason.